everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Bill Belichick, that's right, Chapel Bill, Chapel Thrill, my man is coming to college football, okay? So we have gone through the whole cycle with this, and even when I recorded on Tuesday, that was the day after he did McAfee, I wasn't really sold that it was actually going to happen, but the news cycle continued Tuesday night into Wednesday, midday, and you realize, a fake interview process doesn't go this long. I compared it to Dan Hurley with the Lakers. Like Dan Hurley, I'm so interested in the Lakers. Flies out on a Friday. He's back he's back for the Billy Joel concert Saturday night. It's like, whatever. But Bill Belichick, it was a 3-4 day process. You could tell it was starting to get real. And obviously on Wednesday night, he did accept the job. Now, what's interesting about that, we did a reaction on Wednesday night. I still sort of have my doubts. I still think you can say, I come from the NFL and I know this, and I used to run player personnel in the NFL. College is so different. And I think what is different to me, we talked about it on the Wednesday show, is that these are players that have no contracts, that are basically free agents. You got to re-recruit them. And as I said on the Wednesday kind of immediate reaction is, until you get the commitment at 10 o'clock from the offensive tackle that you've been coveting, and then you wake up and Hayes Fawcett puts out a graphic that says he's committing to Miami. Like, until that happens, I don't think you can really prepare yourself for the new world of college football. But what I will also say is this is glasses half full Torres, right? I want to be positive about this, because what I will give Bill Belichick credit to, as I've heard more about the process behind the scenes, some of the early hires that he's made, most notably Mike Lombardi, who's one of his longtime lieutenants. What I will say is he is taking this seriously. He's going there to, I believe, win at the highest level. If you had even asked me 48 hours ago, it felt to me, is he just doing this to get Steve in the door and get Steve Belichick, his son, a coaching opportunity? And as I've read more about it, I think he's going there believing that he can win national championships. But again, it's a totally different world. But I think the hire, I feel better about it today than I did even 24 hours ago. But what I want to do now, instead of sitting here criticizing, rehashing what I talked about yesterday, what I want to do now is almost give Bill Belichick a blueprint, okay? I can't tell him X's and O's. I can't tell him how to draw up a safety blitz. Trust me, I'm the last person to do that. But what I can tell you, I've covered college sports for years, and there are some things that I think he has to do if he wants to be successful. It's more than just having this much NIL money in the bank, bring in this guy with this scheme. There are some things specific to college football that I think he's got to learn, think he's got to understand. So let's dive into essentially Torres's blueprint for what Bill Belichick's first steps are as the head coach at North Carolina. By the way, comment section is a little quiet here on a Thursday. Drop your comments, your thoughts on Bill Belichick to North Carolina in the comment section. Let's get into what Bill Belichick is going to do, what he needs to do. I think the first thing that's absolutely fascinating, and I think it will tell us, like, how is he going to run this operation? I'm just curious what he does with the roster that he inherits from Mac Brown. Because listen, Mac Brown, like, I think there's this reputation of like, oh, Mac Brown, he's a great recruiter, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, go look at those last few recruiting classes. They weren't very good. 26th nationally last year, 31st in 2023. So those are supposed to be your sophomore classes, your junior classes that are supposed to elevate the program. And I'm just curious on a couple things. Clearly, there is talent on the offensive side of the ball. North Carolina averaged 30-plus points per game. Frankly, it was the offense that had all the answers. It was the defense that, frankly, had none of the answers. But what I am just genuinely curious about, is this a Deion Sanders? I'm coming in, I'm bringing my own luggage, and it's a Louis? Because if it is, I think that could be a slippery slope. And I'm just curious, again, how he evaluates this roster. I think there are pieces that he needs to retain. Now, some of their best players, Amarion Hampton, the star running back, some of their wide receivers are draft eligible, so he might not be able to keep them. But I think that's kind of an interesting first point, right? You have kind of a quote-unquote franchise back Can you get him to come back for another year? Can you give him that NIL bag comparable to being a second, third, fourth round pick, whatever? So I'm just curious in general what he does, because I think there's some very interesting pieces at some very interesting spots. But I also think transparently, there are a lot of players, a lot of places where the team isn't that good. And I think, especially on the defensive side of the ball, places where players were underdeveloped. On defense, as I've said, multiple kind of high 4-star, 5-star guys that have not worked out. You go back a few years ago, what was the kid's name? Rice, who was like a top 10, Travis Shaw, excuse me, top 10 prospect in America. He's kind of just a dude. Can Bill Belichick get those guys playing at a higher level? But then also, how many guys do you push out the door? I think that's just going to be fascinating to watch. Again, is it a Dion, I'm bringing my own luggage, it's Louis kind of deal? Because I think even Coach Prime would tell you, it was easy to shove the guys out the door, but to find 40, 50 replaceable college players, I think is a little bit more difficult. So, one, I do think what will be interesting is how does he evaluate the players in house and how many does he keep? I think you do have to keep a core, even if the guys aren't good enough. I think we learned the lesson from Coach Prime. Now, Coach Prime in year two. Now, nobody's a bigger proponent of Dion, of Coach Prime, than I am. But in year one, I think Coach Prime learned a hard lesson of you push 70 guys out the door. You're just in this era of college football, you're not going to be able to find 70 guys to replace them, because the bottom line is that everybody's recruiting from the same pool of guys, right? And everybody's got money. North Carolina may have 20 million in NIL. Well, guess what? First of all, revenue sharing is coming next year, so everybody's going to have money to spend. But so does Miami, so does Clemson, so does Ohio State. Those best players, everybody's recruiting. And I'm just curious how many guys stay, how many guys go. I think beyond that, this to me is the big stuff. Let's get into all the dynamics of recruiting. Because again, at the end of the day, we all know Bill Belichick knows scheme. He knows players, he knows whatever. But can you get those dudes into the building that matters? And to me, outside of just, who's already in the building, who are you retaining? I think the bigger thing that Bill Belichick has to do is he has to get people that understand the college landscape as it is right now. Now, listen, you can bring in your player personnel people. You can bring in your assistant coaches that you believe know X's and O's out the wazoo. If that's Matt Patricia, if that's Josh McDaniels, as I said, Mike Lombardi, who was a longtime player personnel guy for him, is already on his staff. Like, if you want to bring in the football people to coach football, that's fine. But you need some dudes that understand the college landscape as it currently is. What do I mean by that? People that know the people that matter, know the agents, know the 7-on-7 people in basketball, the AAU coach. Like, I know he's not a basketball coach, but you get the point. Like in college basketball, you need the guys that kind of know the guys. And that to me is going to be the most important part of this. Do you bring in the guys that can build the connections so that you can connect with not just the best players, but all sorts of players? Because no one on Bill Belichick's inner circle, in Bill Belichick's inner circle, have those relationships. No kind of the lower level agents, no the lower level 7. It's just not a world they've ever been in, and you need those people to succeed. Let me give you a couple quick examples of what I'm talking about, okay? I'll give you a quick example from the basketball space, and then we'll get back to football. But with basketball, what was the big story this week? It was AJ DeBanza committing to BYU. And it was funny because we talked about it on Tuesday's show. He committed on Tuesday. And then Tuesday night, I kind of talked to somebody pretty close to the recruitment. And it was funny to talk to somebody who's actually in that world, whose every single day is to build relationships, network, whatever, and actually speak to that person as opposed to read stuff on the internet. Because that person was like, oh, yeah, well, going through everything. He's like, well, that school was out of the mix because they just don't have enough NIL money. Well, that school was out of the mix because the assistant coach screwed over this guy back in the day and the agent hates this guy. This school wasn't in the mix because this agent was there. This school wasn't in the mix because they're with a certain shoe company and it was never going to be this school. And it's just like, it was mind boggling to me to read certain things and then to hear, oh, it was reported that this school was in better shape and they were never really in the mix. That school was actually more in the mix than we thought because of this relationship that hasn't been talked about. And so if that happens in basketball, it happens in football. And you know what comes to mind to me, and this is something I don't think anybody would really remember except for me because I cover this every day. But when Kalen DeBoer got the job at Alabama, when he left Washington to come to Alabama, we talked about this all summer. There was only one person on that Washington staff that flew with him from Washington to Alabama for the introductory press conference. Wasn't Ryan Grubb his offensive coordinator, wasn't his defensive coordinator, wasn't his quarterbacks coach. It was Courtney Morgan, his general manager. Okay. And Courtney Morgan is a guy that has all those long-standing relationships. He knows high school coaches, he knows agents, he knows college coaches. He's got his kind of finger to the pulse of the portal. And we've seen the impact that it's had on Alabama. I know that we kind of mocked Alabama during this week as far as what they did, kind of in the playoff conversation. But nobody doubts that they put together a heck of a roster. They put together a heck of a recruiting class. They recruited the portal really well. And I remember after Kalen DeBoer got that job, he's doing all the press conferences. And then I'd go on Twitter, and Courtney Morgan, his right hand man, was at this high school, was at this training facility, was meeting with this person. And it was all documented on Twitter. And so you need those people that can build those relationships to even open the door to the conversations that you need to have to get the players that you need to have success. So you need people that understand the college landscape. You want to bring in, again, Matt Patricia, Josh McDaniels, whoever. You need those people that have the relationships in the high school and the lower level ranks to get the players in the door that you want. Speaking of which, I think there's two things from the actual recruiting perspective when Bill Belichick gets on these Zooms, gets on these phone calls that have to change. First of all, I'm going to say something that sounds crazy controversial, and I don't know if people are going to make fun of me for it. I don't think most of the players that Bill Belichick is recruiting are really going to care all that much about the 6 Super Bowls. Like, listen, it's cool. It's awesome. But here's the bottom line. I think if he's going into these Zoom calls saying, here's my rings, here's my bling, come play for me, it ain't going to work. And let me tell you why. First of all of these schools, Bill Belichick has won at the highest level of the NFL, but all of these schools develop guys for the pros, right? I mean, if you're a 5-star quarterback, Bill Belichick said, well, I coached Tom Brady. It's like, yeah. And Steve Sarkisian can be like, I developed 7 guys in this offense to get ready for the pros. I turned Mac Jones into a first-round pick. I turned, whoever, whatever. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. I turned this guy into a first-round pick. I turned that guy into a first-round pick. We can make fun of Ryan Day. Ryan Day turned C.J. Stroud into a first-round pick. Justin Fields into a first-round pick. And so it's like this idea that somehow the rings are going to cut through. I just don't believe it. If you're a wide receiver, yeah, it's great that Bill Belichick won 6 rings. But if you're like a 5-star, I'd rather go play for Ryan Day and Brian Hartline, who have developed Marvin Harrison, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Garrett Wilson, whatever. Now, if you're a 3-star slot guy, that might be a difference. That might be different. But are those the guys that are going to elevate that program from 8-4 to 11-1 to compete for national championships? I don't think so. And so I don't think you can play it with the high school kids. And I'll say this, the high school kids will be interesting. The portal kids, I just think flat out don't care. Most of the portal kids, you have to understand, and we've talked about it on this show. I've talked about it with a million people in college sports. Most of the portal kids are looking for a payday. The best players don't really enter the portal unless their coach gets fired, right? I mean, think about the top players that are going to be in this NFL draft coming up, and I don't have a whole list off the top of my head. Take out like Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders because obviously they went with their coach. But Mason Graham, Michigan, Will Johnson, Michigan, whoever last year, Marvin, like these guys don't transfer. The best players don't transfer. You know who does transfer? A lot of G5 guys and a lot of guys that know that they're not going to be NFL players that are looking for another payday, like Will Howard, like Dylan Gabriel, like Peyton Thorne, whoever. And so those guys don't care about, can you get me to the NFL? Because the bottom line is, even if they get to the NFL, it's going to be a 3rd, 4th round pick, and their biggest payday is going to be in college football. Why do you think Will Howard played at Ohio State this year? It was because he realized, I'm going to make more as Ohio State's quarterback than I am as a 4th round pick of the Cincinnati Bengals or the New Orleans Saints or whatever. So he did an extra year, and I just don't think portal kids are going to care that much about the 6 rings. They're going to be like, I need the biggest bag because I don't have much of a future in the NFL. So I think he has to adjust that recruiting pitch. And what I think is most important, I don't know if there's charm deep down inside that, that whatever's in, pumping blood through his veins in there. He, by the way, and I've seen the joke, but it's true. He must be a pretty good recruiter because obviously we've seen his female companionship of late. But like, I do think he is going to have to turn on the charm. And this is one thing that has kind of annoyed me in this process. I kind of talked about all the things that I think are being overblown, especially from people that cover the NFL and don't understand college football. Um, but one thing that has really bothered me is people like, well, I mean, if Deion Sanders can do it, I mean, Deion Sanders doesn't even do home visits. Deion Sanders is doing it. And look at what he did. He's 9-3 this year. It's like, well, one, Deion, of course, I had 3 years at Jackson to kind of figure out the landscape. Deion, of course, had 2 sons, really 3 if you include his oldest son, Deion Sanders Jr., who played high level football, that had been through the process. He had seen it all from the other side of things. But here's the other thing about Coach Prime. Yeah, he doesn't do a lot of in home visits. Yeah, he doesn't travel. Yeah, the players come to him. But when the players get to campus, that charm goes on like that. Okay. And I think that's the part that we cannot underestimate with Deion Sanders and we cannot overestimate with Bill Belichick is that we can talk about the 6 rings. We can talk about whatever. We can just talk about NIL money. But once you get a kid on campus, once you get him on a Zoom, can you turn on the charm and articulate how I'm going to turn you into a pro? Why I'm the right guy? Why I'm better to get you to the next level than Dabo Swinney, than Ryan Day, than whatever, Steve Sarkisian, Lane Kiffin. Because if you can't articulate it, if you can't turn on the charm, none of it matters. I was actually thinking about this. You know what Bill Belichick's potential biggest problem is going to be? It's almost going to be the opposite of my old buddy JJ Redick. Okay, let me use a cross sport example. But with JJ Redick, what has been his problem? It's that he was great on a podcast articulating, "Oh, I'm going to run this out of bounds play and here's why it's going to work." And it's like, "Okay, JJ, it's easy to say that on a pod. But what happens when you have a 7-foot guy guarding the inbounder? There's 2 seconds left. One of your guys in the huddle wasn't paying attention. Some guy trips over. All of a sudden, it doesn't look as good. I think Belichick's the exact opposite. I think he's got the institutional knowledge of how to put you in a position to succeed, but can he articulate it? And can he articulate why he's any different than Dabo Swinney, than Mario Cristobal, than Ryan Day, than Steve Sarkisian? And I don't know if he'll be able to do that. And so to me, stop comparing him to Coach Prime because when Coach Prime gets a kid on campus, he bats like 1,000, puts on the charm, it articulates how he's going to put you in position to succeed. And Coach Prime doesn't really miss out on many guys. And I think with Bill Belichick, it's just going to be fascinating to just see if he can do that. Fascinating to see. And we talked about it a little bit, I think on Tuesday's show, but certainly on the reaction show on whatever it was, Wednesday night, is the recruiting thing. You can say you don't have to travel, but kids are still going to come to campus on Saturday for a big game. Are you going to meet with them in your office for a half an hour before the game? You got a 6 o'clock, 7:30 kickoff. At 11 o'clock, mom and dad might want to be in your office talking to you about your son. Are you going to come in to the office at 7 a.m. to have breakfast with them the next day? This is what all of your competition is doing. And I'll just be curious if Bill Belichick can do it as well. So to me, I think, first of all, it's just going to be awesome to see how he evaluates that roster. That's the football side. He's going to be good in the X's and O's, but I believe make sure that you have those football people that understand this landscape in modern college football in 2024, but also can you turn on the charm? And I think the recruiting pitch has to be refined. Certainly, your selling point is 6 Super Bowl rings, but you have to be able to articulate why you're the right person, why you're the right guy.